down to her last lace shawl. A starving mother sold it, the tailor wed her. The shawl came in on a Tuesday. I know it was Tuesday because I just finished the last of the Hendricks order, 3 work shirts, plain muslin, no buttons worth the name, and I was threading a new bobbin when the door opened, and the bell above it rang the way it does when someone pushes against the wind. October wind. The kind that finds the gap between your collar and your neck no matter how you dress. She came in holding it folded over both arms, the way you carry something you're not sure you have the right to put down. I didn't look up right away. That's my habit. Finish the thread, then look. People who come to sell something always wait. They've already waited longer than you know, before they ever open the door. When I did look, I saw a woman maybe 35, maybe 40, hard to tell when a person's been going without. Her coat was clean, but the elbows had been turned twice, maybe 3 times. She had dark hair pinned up and a set to her jaw that said she'd practiced what she was going to say, and she was going to say it without crying. She laid the shawl on my counter. "I was told you buy fine goods," she said. I came around from behind the machine. The shawl was Belgian lace or close to it, cream-colored with a border of something that might have been worked by hand, the tight, even loops of it, the weight. You don't see that kind of work in Caldwell. You barely see it in Kansas City. Somebody had cared about this thing. "Where'd you come by this?" I asked, not accusing, just needing to know what I was holding. She lifted her chin maybe a 1/4 inch. "My mother brought it from County Clare. It was mine on my wedding day." I set it back down flat on the counter and smoothed one corner of it with 2 fingers. "How much are you asking?" "Whatever it's worth," she said. "I need coal and flour," and she stopped herself, pressed her lips together, the jaw set again. "Whatever it's worth." I've been a tailor in Caldwell going on 14 years. Before that, I apprenticed in St. Louis under a man named Voss who could look at a bolt of cloth and tell you the county it came from. He taught me fabric the way some men teach their boys to read sign or handle cattle. He taught me that what a thing is worth and what a thing means are 2 entirely different ledgers. I went to the back room and came out with $4.60. That was more than the shawl was worth to resell in Caldwell, Kansas in 1883, and we both knew it. She took the money. She didn't thank me the way people thank you when they feel relieved. She thanked me the way people thank you when they feel the particular shame of needing to. "I'll be back for it," she said. "I know," I said, though I didn't know. I was just saying the thing that wouldn't make her feel worse. She went out into the October wind. Her name was Nora Callahan. I learned that from Ed Pruitt at the feed store 3 days later, not because I asked directly, but because I mentioned a woman had come in to sell some lacework, and Ed, who knew everything about everybody in a 30-mile radius, told me without prompting. Widow. Husband had been a drover, died of a kick to the head outside Abilene 2 summers prior. She had a boy, 8 years old. They were living in the Mather house out on the North Road, the one with the broken front step and the chimney that smoked wrong. I didn't think much more about it. That's not true. I thought about the jaw, the way she'd said it. I've been alone most of my adult life, and I'm not sorry for it mostly. A tailor's life is a quiet one. You measure people. You cut to fit. You do your work and you do it right, and the town leaves you to it. I'm not the kind of man women in Caldwell look twice at. I know that. I'm not tall. I'm not a rancher or a lawman or anything that reads as power out here. I work with thread. My hands are good for fine things. That is not nothing, but in this country in this time, it does not make a man's blood run in the stories people tell. Nora Callahan came back for the shawl 6 weeks later. She had $4.60 exact in a cloth purse. She'd been washing for the hotel, Ed Pruitt told me later, taking in their linens at night after her boy was asleep, returning them pressed before 6 in the morning. I took the coins. I folded the shawl in brown paper and tied it with twine, which I never do for resale goods, and slid it across the counter. She looked at the package. "You wrapped it," she said. "It's that kind of thing." She tucked it under her arm. She was thinner than she'd been in October. Not alarmingly so, not yet, but I could see it in the line of her collarbone above the coat, the way the fabric hung different. "How's the boy?" I said. I don't know why I said it. She looked at me. "He's well, thank you." "How's the coal holding?" A pause. "We're managing." The word managing. I've heard that word from 100 people standing in my shop. It means the opposite of what it says. I told her I had a coat that needed a lining replaced, that the woman who'd ordered it had moved before I finished it, and the sleeves were about the right length for a boy of 8 or 9, and did she want it? I said I'd trade her the coat for an afternoon sewing on some repair work I had backed up, work I genuinely did have backed up because I am one man, and the pile never shrinks the way I want it to. She looked at me a long time. "I'm not asking for charity," she said. "I'm not offering any," I said. "I'm short on sewing time. You can sew. The coat's sitting there. Those are just facts." Another long look, then all right. She came on Saturday. Her boy Thomas, she called him, never Tom, sat in the corner with a book and did not fidget and did not break anything, which put him ahead of most adults I've had in my shop. Nora worked through a pile of repairs steady and fast and good, better than I expected, which told me something about the County Clare mother with the lace shawl and what she'd taught her daughter before the daughter ever crossed an ocean. We didn't talk much that first Saturday. Some. The comfortable kind of some, not filling silence for the sake of it, just speaking when there was something worth saying. She came back the following Saturday. I hadn't asked her to, she just came. I had another pile of repairs. Thomas had a different book. By December, I had started leaving the back room warm in the mornings and making enough coffee for 2 cups without thinking about it too hard. That's about as close to courtship as I know how to do. I am better with fabric than with words, and I was 51 years old, and I had not courted a woman in 20 years, and I was not sure the equipment still worked. What I did know was that the Mather house was cold. I knew because I'd driven past it twice on pretexts, once checking on a delivery to the farmer 2 miles north, once for no reason at all that I admitted to myself, and both times I could see the thin thread of smoke from that bad chimney, and I thought about what a thin thread of smoke meant when the temperature was dropping to 12 at night. In December she came in one Saturday and she looked bad. Not sick, but the kind of tired that goes all the way to the floor. Thomas was pale. She'd been coughing, she said when I asked, just a little, nothing to worry about, and I looked at the line of her collarbone again. I said, "I want to say something and I want you to hear it plain." She waited. I have 3 rooms above this shop that I use for storage. One of them has a window that faces south and gets full sun all morning, and it's warm on the worst days because the flue from the shop goes up through the wall. I'm asking you to move in above the shop, you and Thomas, for the winter. I'll clear the room and put in a proper bed and a second cot. You can keep your own hours. I won't be under your feet and you won't be under mine. What you owe me is nothing, because I have more room than I need, and you and the boy need a warm place to sleep. That is all I'm saying. She looked at me for a long time. "People will talk," she said. "Let them," I said. "They already talk. People in a town this size talk about everything. They talk about me because I'm a tailor and I don't drink and I don't gamble, and those are apparently things worth talking about. They'll get tired of it." "I won't be in debt to you," she said. "You're not in debt to me, you're just warm." She looked out the window. The sky was the color of old pewter, the kind of sky that means snow by nightfall. "All right," she said, "for the winter." They moved in on a Sunday. Thomas carried his own bag without being asked, which told me again who his mother was. I'd put a braided rug on the floor of the south room, and I'd found a second quilt in the chest in my own room and put it on the cot. I did not make a fuss about any of this. I just put it there. That first night I heard Thomas ask his mother something through the wall, too quiet to make out the words, and I heard her answer him, and then it was quiet, and I stood at my kitchen table for a minute just listening to the quality of the quiet, which was different with people in the building. Fuller. I don't know how else to say it. The winter was long. There is something that happens when you live in the same building with a woman and a child, day after day, that happens quietly and without ceremony, and you don't always notice it until you're already in the middle of it. Thomas started coming down to the shop in the afternoons to watch me work. He didn't ask to touch anything for 2 full weeks, just watched, and when he finally asked if he could hold the shears, I let him and I showed him how. He had good hands, steady. I told him so, and he straightened up the way boys do when a man says something real to them. Nora came down most evenings to use the kitchen, which was bigger than the one upstairs. We ate together most nights without ever officially deciding to. She cooked better than I did, which was not difficult. I'd been eating the same 4 things for 14 years. She put things in food I didn't know went in food. One night in January, she made something with dried peppers and a piece of salt pork that smelled up the whole building, and I sat at that table and ate 2 helpings and didn't say anything because I didn't trust myself to say anything that wouldn't sound like more than I was ready to say. The cough stayed through January. I drove her to Doc Hennessy without asking permission, just knocked on the upstairs door one Tuesday morning and said I had errands to run and she was coming with me. She gave me a look that had some heat in it. I said the look was noted and we were going anyway. Hennessy said it was the damp, not her lungs. Said she needed rest and good food and less cold air, and looked at me when he said it in a way that I chose not to interpret too carefully. February. A night that dropped to 4 below, the kind of cold that gets into everything, that finds the places where the caulk has gone and works its fingers through. I was up late. I'm always up late. It's how I'm built, working by lamplight on a vest that needed reweaving where moths had been at it. The stairs creaked at about 11 o'clock, and she appeared in the doorway of the shop in her coat over her nightgown with her hair down, and a look on her face that was not alarm exactly, but near it. "Thomas," she said, "he's burning up." I was already standing. I won't go through all of it. It was a bad 3 days. The fever went high the second night, high enough that I sat up with him while Nora slept for 4 hours because she'd been awake for 30, and I made her go. I sat in the chair by the cot with a damp cloth and changed it when it went warm, and I talked to the boy, quietly, the way you talk to someone who may or may not be fully hearing you. I told him about the time a flash flood took out the only bridge between here and the Hendricks place, and we had to float 6 bolts of cloth across on a raft made out of a barn door. I don't know if he heard me. I kept talking anyway. The fever broke on the 3rd day. Thomas opened his eyes, looked at me, and said, "Did the cloth make it across?" "All of it," I said, "bone dry." He closed his eyes again. He was going to be all right. Nora was standing in the doorway. I don't know how long she'd been there. When I stood up and turned around, she crossed the room in 3 steps, and she put both her arms around me, and she pressed her face against my shoulder, and she held on. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. I put one hand on her back between her shoulder blades, and I held her while she shook, not crying exactly, more like the shaking that comes after, when the body finally lets go of what it's been holding. I have been a useful man in my life. I have made things that fit people well. I have done honest work at a fair price. I have been quiet and steady, and I have not asked for much. But I had not been held like that in a long time, and I had not, until that moment with her shaking against my shoulder and the dawn coming gray through the south window and the boy asleep behind us, understood how much I had wanted someone to need me the way she needed me right then. Not the wanting to be saved kind of need. The other kind. The kind that says, "You are the person I am here with in this room in this moment, and I am glad of it." She pulled back. She looked at me. Her eyes were red and her hair was loose, and she looked more herself right then than she ever had in my shop with her jaw set and her guard up. "Amos," she said, "my name just that." "I know," I said. which was all either of us needed to say about it for the time being. Spring came slow that year. March was still cold, still brown, and then one week in April everything went green at once the way it does on the plains when it finally decides, like the land had been saving it up and just opened its hand. Thomas was out every morning by 6. The boy had energy like a banked fire once he was well, contained all winter and now loose in the world. I started giving him odd jobs around the shop, real ones, and paying him a small wage, and he treated that wage like it was gold dust. Nora watched him count his coins one evening at the kitchen table and looked at me with something in her face I didn't entirely know what to do with yet, but I was learning. The town talked, of course it talked, I'd known it would. Marta Sweeney from the dry goods said something to the pastor, who said something carefully to me on a Sunday, and I told him carefully that Mrs. Callahan and her son were boarding in my upper rooms through the winter, and that my understanding of Christian neighborliness was that it did not require an explanation, and he allowed as how I had a point. Dutch Calver at the livery said something less careful to my face one afternoon in April, the kind of thing men say when they want to see if you'll rise to it. I'm not a big man and I don't fight, and Dutch knows it. I looked at him for a moment and then I said, "I'll tell you what, Dutch, when your shop turns out work that fits the way mine does, we can talk about what I do with my evenings." And I walked away. He didn't say anything more. I don't know exactly when I decided, or if decide is even the right word. It was more like a thing that was already true, and I was the last one to get around to saying it out loud. Thomas had told me in March, with a boy's complete absence of tact, that he wished I was his father. Nora had been in the other room. I don't know if she heard. I'd said something about how I was glad he was around and left it at that, because I am a man who does not rush things. But I thought about it plenty. May, a Saturday evening. Thomas was asleep. We were sitting at the kitchen table after supper, Nora with her mending and me with a book I wasn't really reading. The lamp was warm. Outside the window the town was going quiet the way it does by 8 o'clock. Horses put up, a door closing somewhere, the sound of the last wagon on the main road. I put the book down. "I want to say something," I said. She looked up. "I know what I am," I said. "I'm a tailor in a small town. I'm 51 years old and I'm not a young man's idea of a good prospect, and I don't own land and I don't carry iron. I know what this town sees when it looks at me. I've known for a long time." She set down the mending. "What I know how to do is work," I said. "I know how to make things fit and last. I know how to be steady. I know how to be there. And I know that Thomas counted those coins for 40 minutes last Tuesday, and I know what your face looked like when he did, and I know," I stopped, gathered myself. "I know that the south room is yours for as long as you want it, but I'd rather it be the room I go to sleep in too, and I'd rather Thomas called me something other than Mr. Holt." A long quiet. "Amos Holt," she said slowly, the way she said my name when she was making up her mind about something. "You are the most careful man I have ever met." "I'm not sure that's It's a compliment," she said. "I've had enough men in my life who moved fast and left damage. I didn't know careful was something a man could be." She reached across the table. She put her hand over mine, flat, warm, sure of itself. "Yes," she said. "I'll marry you, Amos." I looked down at her hand on mine. I turned my hand over and held it. Outside, the last of the spring light was going off the rooftops. Inside, the lamp held steady. Her hand was warm and the mending was on the table, and the upstairs was quiet with Thomas sleeping, and I sat there in the yellow light of my own kitchen, my shop, my building, my home, and for the first time in a long time I did not feel like a man the world had forgotten to count. We married in June, a Thursday. Pastor Whitfield. Marta Sweeney came, which surprised me, and Ed Pruitt and his wife, and Dutch Calver, of all people, stood in the back and shook my hand after with something that was almost respect in it. Thomas stood up straight beside me at the front of that little church with his hair combed and his collar right, and he shook the pastor's hand when it was done and called him sir. There was a moment just after, outside on the church steps, the June sun full and warm, the main street of Caldwell going about its business around us, when Nora took my arm and leaned against my shoulder, not performing anything for the town, not even thinking about the town, just leaning against me the way you lean against something you've decided is solid. I put my hand over hers where it rested on my arm. This is what I want to tell you. Not the story of a man on a horse, not a man who took the hill or fought the line or held the pass. Just this, a man who kept his shop clean and his word good and his work right. A man who had a warm room and gave it. A man who knew how to be there. And a woman, a good, proud, strong woman, who had been through enough to know the difference between a man who looked like something and a man who was something. She knew the difference. That shawl still sits in the cedar chest at the foot of our bed. I take it out sometimes when she's not in the room. The lacework is just as tight as it was when she laid it on my counter that October. That kind of work doesn't come apart. You just have to know what you're looking at. I knew what I was looking at.